Well, thank you everyone for sharing your observations. Now, actually, I'd like to pass it over to Sam actually to do more of a proper introduction to Sansar. For those of us who may not, some of you have quests. Sam does Quest standalone Quest is not yet supported. Yeah, so some of you have links, so that won't be a problem. But some of you, this will be your opportunity to ask questions and learn about it. So Sam, the stage is yours.
Right, and should we make it? I think you had said, Michael, it'll be a portion. Maybe I'll screen share Zoom. Was that the
Yeah.
idea? And
Oh,
then
yeah, maybe I need to give
after
you.
that, um, we can kind of hop into VR. Was that the idea?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So let me. I gave you host some functions. So.
Oh, so I can screen share. Okay, cool. Maybe I'll give a little bit of high level on Sansar, where we've come, where we're at right now. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then really where we're going, because we've taken a very different path than I think pretty much everybody else in the space, at least in the social VR space, and then in the gaming space, or just in VR as a whole. Just a different approach, a different customer, and a different way that we're going to kind of proceed going forward. So Sansar has been. So Sansar was kind of built out of Linden Lab, as mentioned there. So the folks that built Second Life, it was incubated at Second Life. It was funded by Second Life, and it was really meant to be a spiritual successor. And this all started just shy of a decade ago. So Second Life kind of saw what was coming. As it turns out, for anybody that's wondering, Second Life, if you're not familiar, it's just the largest kind of virtual online economy or world. And so they were really kind of pioneers early on around what could these online or digital worlds and spaces kind of look like. But what made Second Life really unique is that it wasn't a game. And the reason is because it allowed people to earn real livelihoods inside and then cash out. So even last year alone, there's $500 million in transactions in Second Life, and they paid out over $60 million to people around the world. Who are just, again, having their livelihoods inside. It was built on user-generated content and really had a platform. Sansar then kind of fast forwarding, really right now, the Sansar engine was built, and that's the kind of key part about Sansar, right, is that Sansar built out its own engine, it built out its own render, and then since tailored that specifically for the live events industry. So if you want to, Sansar started out really kind of trying to boil the ocean in a way. And so it's trying to be everything to everybody for a long time. As a little bit of background, and really that was meant for anybody that wants to go and create a space they can create inside. The problem is, as we found with, I'm sure you guys know from many, many VR applications, that does not successfully solve the kind of two most important pieces that you have to solve in social VR at least. So I'll dive into those in a second. But for some background, so my own personal background, I've been in this space of virtual live events kind of the last 5 years or so. So I've been at Sansar the last 2.5 years. Prior to Sansar, I ran virtual live events for a different company called AltSpace VR up until AltSpace was acquired by Microsoft. At that time, learned kind of the power of virtual live events, moved over to Sansar because Sansar had all the missing pieces to do it the right way at scale. So kind of fast forwarding now, where Sansar is, usually I'm sitting across from a lot of people that put on events because we're kind of catered that way. Now there's much more to do in Sansar rather than just events, but in order to actually survive, we think kind of there's like the three things that you need to sort of, three check boxes you have to tick. I think it's going to be particularly interesting on the heels of the VR ham activation. I think there's a lot of good learnings that they could kind of apply from some of this too. Because I was looking at it, it looked really cool. But I think it might struggle on some of the areas that a lot of other VR companies struggle on. So the first one is, and you guys all know these, but the why VR question. So why is this actually a good use case for VR? Does it take advantage of the medium? Is it actually going to help people overcome that friction? And that kind of leads into the two most other important things that we found, at least when I was at AltSpace VR and now at Sansar, and then just kind of chatting with friends. And that is, can you overcome the friction of getting in, whether it's in VR or even if it's just a desktop app? But more importantly, because a lot of people do that once, like a cinematic VR does that, a lot of games can do that, a lot of museums can do that. But much more importantly, can you get them to come in over and over and over again, overcoming that friction each time into the same app? And that's where I would say a large swath of the VR industry starts to fall kind of by the wayside, because it's really tough, right? It's a whole new challenge. And the problem is a lot of these players early on, whether it's Facebook Spaces or any of these other ones, it's trying to paint the same paintbrush that worked on mobile or on web and trying to paint that into VR. But it's a very different challenge, right? So the reason we're not all hanging out in VR right now is because it's a lot of work to kind of get in and overcome that. So how can you get people to come in not just once, but over and over and over again? And I think really, especially when there's a lot of barrier to entry, that's where we've actually already solved that with the live events kind of model in real world, right? So we already know we'll spend a lot of money. Maybe we'll get on a plane, fly somewhere to our favorite event, or at least buy our date something, put gas in the car, whatever it is. We're prepared to spend money and overcome that. So really, and then if you think about the promise of social VR, as the former CEO used to say at Altspace VR, he would say, the promise of social VR is that you can feel physically closer to anybody or physically closer to somebody than any other way possible online. So that was the kind of core premise that Altspace VR was working off of. The differences now with Sansar and how we're kind of tailoring it is we are not, and this is the really important part, we are not the promoter. So you can look at whether it's other VR apps or other video games, take like whether it's like the Wave VR or Fortnite or Minecraft or Roblox or VR Chat or VTime or any of those. Essentially, those are all a video game. And that video game, if they're doing an event, that video game is servicing as the promoter. So they're saying, we're going to book a talent. Maybe it's a speaker for a speaker series. Maybe it's an artist. Maybe it's a comedian. We're going to book them and we're going to have them promote our game because ultimately they want to promote their video game. Sansar has built instead more of like a next generation live events platform, and we're here to service the promoter. The only challenge with that, and that promoter could be anybody from an events agency to a museum, anybody that wants to tell somebody about an event that's happening. The problem is if you actually want to service the promoter, it's really expensive and it's really painful just to get the bare bones kind of features in place that you need in order to start to meet the demands there. So some of those bare bones I learned sort of the hard way at Altspace VR. If you don't own your own game engine, you don't really own anything. And specifically with that is if you don't own your own game engine, you have no control over your event. So there were numerous times at Altspace VR, we'd be planning out an event and then Unity or Unreal, they would push an update the day before, the week before, all the scripts, everything breaks in the environment, the experience, and the entire event is canceled. Unity or Unreal, they don't mind. It's, they don't even really care that much financially about the whole VR, kind of vertical, right? They're doing manufacturing, they're doing tons and tons of stuff for the rest of the gaming industries. But for that promoter, it matters a lot, right? So really what the promoter ended up saying is, here's what we need. We need complete creative control. We don't want it to look cartoony. We need it to look real. We need it to be super flexible so we can build our own spaces or work with you to build it. We need to be able to bring in brands, and we need to make those things in Sansar fully interactive with unlimited interactivity built for large numbers of people across all different types of hardware devices. And so really that's what it kind of takes, we think, to just barely kind of get in and start servicing this kind of live events industry. So starts with the game engine, then starts with the renderer. But even beyond that, it then means what are the actual tool sets that the live events industry needs? Well, they need to have like a fully integrated ticketing system. Here's a fun fact. When I was at Altspace, and Altspace had just been doing some events with, it was like NBC News at the time, the Sci-Fi Channel, Reggie Watts, Justin Roiland, it was kind of on a roll. And I remember pitching that, hey, to the CEO, what we really need is we need a ticketing system. And he said, I understand, but we won't ever be able to build that out. And the reason is no venture capitalist is going to want to fund a virtual live events company, but they will fund a social VR company. So that kind of inherent difference in kind of butting heads of the traditional kind of call it Silicon Valley type of companies versus the live events industry, vastly different. Instead, if you're looking at servicing them though, fully integrated ticketing system with multiple tiers of tickets, so you can give different people different levels of experience. You have a fully integrated digital merchandising system and real world merchandising system to allow you to purchase any manner of items for your avatar, your character, all of which are UGC, so anybody can upload those. And then the real world, so you can link out to real world goods. You need to be able to incorporate brands and sponsors, as we kind of chatted about, and then having the ability to tip or send money in real time. So it's those 5 kind of revenue streams that now when you're talking to the live events industry, that's what their industry is built on. That's how they make money. So if you take a company like a Live Nation, you go down through their 10K annual statement, you'll see exactly how their kind of business operates there. So that's what they really needed. And what the promoters want to do is they want you essentially to get out of the way. Right? And that's the ultimate vision of Sansar, is we are this engine and we're now allowing other people to use this engine, specifically promoters, and we can step out of the way. So now what we're finding is by doing it this way, our real customer is not the end user. We actually found out how to make a great end user experience a long time ago. The harder part is servicing the promoter and giving them all the tools that they need. And that's a vast landscape of things that they need. So then on top of that, we'd say, why is it, if we were just a VR company, kind of like anybody else out there, we would probably say, hey, we should keep on building for the next VR headset, right? That's the obvious kind of stance everybody takes. But that is not the stance you want to take if you're servicing the promoter. What they need is, okay, you have it in VR and it's going to look great. That's awesome. You have it on desktop. Okay, that's great too. We need mobile. We need Mac. We can run all the numbers around, hey, how many people actually have these? But without mobile and Mac, you can't even begin to start servicing them because that's where their audiences are. That's who the artists, when they're promoting it out, they can't have that negative feedback of promoting out something really cool, but only having a tiny subset of their audience doing it. And so in doing so, now the way that we've actually seen Sansar evolve is there are people who are building out their venues and booking out their own artists and just putting on these shows on an ongoing basis because it's a real kind of asset that they have once they've built out their own space in Sansar, to people that hire us and want to put on just a major festival, as an example. So really, as far as large scale gatherings, with all the business models, making it look exact, building it out exactly how the partner kind of needs, and then making it flexible, that's where we're able to activate. So during COVID, activate for large scale gatherings in these kind of digital spaces. So all I was going to plan on showing now is kind of giving a little bit of a walkthrough of some of these spaces we've built out previously. I'll probably just take us through a few of them. I think it'll be good showing off some that have artwork inside, just so, because it's pretty relevant from the VR ham conversation. Talk about what we've done with past partners and what those partners are now looking to kind of double and triple down on. Because again, when we work with somebody, it's not for a one-off thing that then gets tossed to the side and there's nothing that happens afterwards. It's for ongoing usage of these things. But yeah, any immediate questions just before we dive in on all
that? Actually, I'm just excited to see. But we were talking about it before. Some of us have seen Sansar years ago, and we really just. I'll be honest. Sansar is just a company I had not heard of much recently, and it's because we're in a different part of the world. We're mostly in Europe, and I think it's just one of these. There's such a there's an Atlantic divide. And of course, there's a big Pacific divide as well. But I don't think Sansar has as a well-known name and platform in this part of the world. And so and so it's fallen off of my radar. But I recently, when I reached out and looked at the website and said, "Wow, it looks really different. it looks a lot more." So I'm personally really excited to see what you're going to show us.
Great. Yeah, I think so. The only request here, Michael, is would you mind granting my other account, not the one that has my face on right here, screen sharing access?
Sorry, I was just answering. You're now host, actually, so you can grant it.
Oh, how do so I'm in here on 2 accounts. Mm-hmm. So one account I'm just staying on here, and then it's my other one that I was going to hoping to do the screen sharing. How do I?
Okay, so then you basically need to enter on another device, because sometimes it happens when you hand over the host function to to the wrong device. So can you enter from another account?
Well, I think I don't know, Sam, because you're a host now. Do you see you can add?
But we have 2 Sams.
Oh yeah, but I gave it to Sam the video, so.
Okay, gotcha.
So, yeah, I think you
can let me see if I can do. Okay, there. I just added so multiple people could screen share at the same time. So this should work out.
Yeah, that's what I should have done if I knew Zoom that well.
No, you're fine. I don't know Zoom that well either, so apologies, guys. I've been hopping between Zoom and Cisco and Google, and I'm sure you guys are all the same too. That's the world we're in.
Yeah.
Okay, so a few things. We're going to try and sprint through this because there's a lot to take in here, and since there are thousands of spaces in Sansar. So inside here, again, there's a little bit of lag, but I think you guys are probably familiar with that. That's just the screen sharing. So here's one of my avatars I've kind of created. All of these items were purchased off the Sansar store, except for this little thing, this little guy. It's a Monster Cat shoulder plushie. I won that as part of a quest line inside of the Monster Cat virtual venue. But we'll get to that in a little bit here. So in Sansar, again, the main things to kind of call out is we built this space. So this is the Ready Player One space. Now, when we built this out, the main reason why I kind of showed this is we're focused pretty heavily on music right now and large music events and music promoters and concerts and things like that. And this is not that. However, it was just helpful because when we worked with Spielberg and the Warner Brothers team, and then when they commissioned us to build a second space, just because they were pleased with this one, we had to basically overcome two big hurdles. So what was unique about the film, I'm sure a lot of people on here, given the audience, have probably seen it. What was unique about that film is it used IP from many of the major film studios and the major gaming publishers. And we had to get all of them to give us the thumbs up on, yes, Sansar, our IP is going to look really good in your platform. And yes, Sansar, our IP is going to be fully safe and secure inside of your platform. So with Sansar, it's a different level of quality, and that's all that we're kind of going for. So we talk about the render, we talk about the avatar customization, whether it's the outfits that people can wear and put on or anything else. That's all that we're kind of calling out. So if it's I was kind of like to show off, I'm just going into free cam. If it's the nuts and bolts on these items, or these are the real world assets, or the lighting reflects, or the stains, reflections, or the stains on the ground, or the kind of worn out paint, that's what we're putting it on. So a lot of people don't want things to look exact to scale or exact details. That's really kind of our calling card. So if you want to look amazing, that's really where we started, right? And so you can hop into Sansar and see tons of spaces that other users have created, events that they're holding inside there all the time, pretty frequently. There's a lot of cool assets in this space. You have like the van from the movie Spaceballs, and you've got this pod from the film 2001: Space Odyssey. You got the ship from Battlestar Galactica. You've got this little mech robot warrior from RoboCop. Any idea what film this red car was from? It's not a sci-fi film.
Was it The Graduate?
Oh, good guess. It was actually Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, yeah.
This was, as we kind of say, Cameron's dad's car. He would never ride. He would just wipe it with a diaper. Okay. No time for that. We got to sprint ahead. So I consider this more or less like a real world space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hop into this space just real quick. I think it'll be relevant here. So this is just a space that we did with Intel. What was unique about it, though, is this is an exact one-to-one replica of Intel's CES booth. It's from a couple of years back, actually. But what's cool about it is it kind of shows off for brands what the capabilities are. So built it out in exact detail. We actually built it out, again, because of the engine, we were able to build it out rapidly in a matter of weeks. And so they would then send their own production team inside, make alterations, and that would then make alterations to the physical space. Now, during CES, Intel had all of their staff members coming in, wearing blue Intel T-shirts that they made themselves. You can get it fairly easily in Sansar, and then giving people kind of tours. Now, one thing about this that was pretty interesting was we like a good challenge. So they had said, so here's what we want to do, Sansar. Okay, we get it. This looks good. We want to make something cool that's not typically very cool. And so specifically, it was one of their products is their new Intel chip. And so what we landed on was kind of a pretty wild idea. But what they said is, let's just build out the inside of the chip and let people go in and excite and explore. So it's sort of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets Tron a bit. So as I'm kind of cruising through here, there's definitely a significant delay on the live streaming. But as I kind of port down, again, the reflections off of the railings and everything else, that's what we kind of call out. A lot of people won't ever notice those little details. But we think if you really want people to feel immersed and, immersed and excited about it, you need to make it look exact. So it's just a way you can add teleporters between these spaces, right? Hop between them, hop back and forth. They give a lot of guided walkthrough tours, but this is just exactly what the inside of their computer chip looks like. So as you go through, different things will pop up as you get close. You have a lot of volumes and things like that that can trigger it. What I'm now going to show is we're going to hop straight into the deep end, and then we'll talk about what's happening real recently now, just at Sansar, and kind of the upward potential. I think it's going to be very, very important for just the VR industry as a whole. So one space that we worked on, this is with an ongoing partner. So it's just basically it's a record label called Monster Cat. And it is, they wanted to use this, they use it on an ongoing basis, but they wanted us to build out essentially an Aztec temple space, fully customized. Some of these things, like they wanted this skull cage right up here to be exactly their skull cage. They then did a real life tour. So right before COVID hit, the last big show we did pre-COVID was a merged reality show. So we do a lot of these things where you can kind of merge realities, letting fans in both realities party together, or one performance that's simultaneously ticketed and broadcast both live and in VR. There's a lot of fun things there. All I'm going to show is real fast kind of the functionality, because everything that we were talking about previously is sort of all built into this space. So it makes it nice just from a convenience standpoint. So up here, if I want to, and I want to click around, this is that quest line that we talked about. There are about 5 or 6 different quest lines all embedded inside of this specific space itself. But on this one, it was, hey, go around, find the different hidden relics, click on them. When you click on them, you'll hear a song stem. And then when you find all of them, you get that unique virtual item, as well as like a unique listen to the song itself, like an early listening. We can do whatever we want with that. That's just what Monster Cat had requested. When it comes to the merchandising piece over here, you can kind of see, so if I click around and say I click buy, click it for the male or female, doesn't matter. But up here, you can purchase the digital item. So just off of the Sansar store, I've already bought it. Otherwise, it would say buy here. And then down below, you can actually link out to purchase the real world item. So that'll just, you can embed tracking links. Over time, right now, that's just going to open up a web browser outside of Sansar. Over time, we're going to integrate all of that stuff inside of the platform itself. Now, this is the part that usually becomes sort of like the aha moment. I think for some background, I think Ollie is part of this group too, right? Right, Michael? Is that right? Typically, Ollie, I forgot his last name.
Yeah, he made the introduction, thankfully.
That's right, yeah. So this ends up being kind of more or less the aha moment for a lot of people in the music space. So we've done a number of shows with just various artists. We've got some big ones kind of coming up, which is going to be cool. And all of them, or a lot of these, are Sansar doesn't even know about it, right? So these events are happening now inside because we just provide these tools for other people to use. But for instance here, only I, or if I'm a performer or a moderator, can have access here. But what you can do is you can start just doing the same type of things you guys have seen before, right? So it's, hey, I want to put different buttons inside. We kind of lovingly refer to this box or these types of boxes as our party in a box. And so I can click a button to then start triggering some kind of effect. In this case, it might be a lighting effect, right? So maybe I'll click a few of these, trigger different lighting effects. There's just hundreds of these different kind of lighting effects we have so far in the library, and we just keep on building them out really fast for partners as they need them. Maybe instead I want to trigger, shadow dancers or whatever happens to be. I'll trigger them on, I'll trigger them off. Maybe instead it's not that, but I want to drop things from the sky. So in this case, Monster Cat wanted to drop oranges from the sky that you could pick up, toss around, throw at people, what have you. You could also say, hey, maybe we'll make it like a 3D disco ball that I'll trigger to kind of be up there. Click on the fire pillars, whatever you might want. And then I'll even turn on anti-gravity. So a big part of this is, especially if you're really going to be trying to service the live events industry, the issue there becomes how can you add ticket holder value? So now when you buy a VIP ticket versus a general admissions ticket in Sansar, a general admissions ticket might grant you access to the main part of the space here, but maybe you're restricted, you can't actually go up into this area. Or you might say, hey, I can go up into some of this, but now what I want is I want to give everybody that bought a VIP ticket exclusive powers or abilities. So you could say, hey, if you bought a VIP ticket, then when you go to jump, you're going to start to fly around. So maybe VIPs can fly, or maybe it's not flying, maybe they're going to run really fast, or they're going to do something else. Maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's instead exclusive items that only certain people can access. So you could say, hey, what if I want to allow somebody to pick up this staff and then say, okay, and then let me start shooting fireballs at other people in the space, as an example. Maybe it's not fireballs though. Maybe instead it's going to be like dance orbs. And maybe when you hit somebody with a dance orb, like I just hit myself there, it's going to then trigger a dance emote, because there's hundreds of thousands of dance emotes on the Sansar store. Each of these we can also build out custom. Maybe it's not that though. Maybe instead you say, hey, we want to do like a dance circle, kind of like we mentioned before. This dance circle was not initially built into the first version of this space. We built it out afterwards for a follow-up event. But it's just a nice way of kind of seeing how these spaces kind of evolve over time. So what Monster Cat said is, hey, that's great. Let's add a dance circle. After a few seconds, let's have everybody do a specific Monster Cat dance. So we built out the Monster Cat dance. You can do that. And then we wanted to have it triggered. They are also selling these dance moves as part of all of this. Now, when it comes to brands, this is a very important kind of part of this whole ecosystem. So we've worked with a lot of brands, a lot of sponsors. So one of them is, so with Pioneer DJ, there's kind of the leading hardware maker in the EDM space, or the electronic music space. They wanted to have some Pioneer DJ branding right here. They also wanted to have a 3D rotating Pioneer DJ and a logo. They're selling some Pioneer DJ virtual merchandise over there. And then they wanted to build out an exact replica of one of their products. So this is their DDJ 200, except for now they wanted to make it all scripted and interactive. So you can link out to get more information about them. There are embedded quest lines. You can scratch the DJ decks. And then fans can even then say, hey, maybe you want to allow fans to trigger some fun kind of visual effects on their own. So from a numbers standpoint, when we launched this space, it was one of our first big kind of forays into music. There's a whole kind of back area that we'll get to in a second. When we launched it, it was with a 3-hour-long event. There were 13 artists that performed. The average time in the event was roughly 57 minutes. And the average user clicked on this specific Pioneer DJ 200 activation 70 plus times. So for Pioneer DJ, because since we own our engine, we can measure all of this, right? And we can update it, and we can manipulate the engine and these platforms to service whatever the promoter might need. And so here, Pioneer DJ, they got to tell a great story around, hey, we spent one sponsorship amount of money, and we got everything we would get from a digital media campaign and everything we would get at like a traditional booth sponsorship that we would do at like a convention, because you can measure foot traffic, you can measure kind of direct engagement that way. So now what we're doing is really by saying that, and the fundamental thing of saying we are not the promoter, we're here to service the promoters, what it means is every major music festival, record label, major artist, sponsor or brand, event agency, and this is just on the music side, let alone the corporate side. So we can do all different types of things for corporate as well, from unique networking spaces. Some big corporate companies are already using Sansar kind of on the regular. They were doing this without us even realizing. So a company called KPMG, they used to do a lot of financial services. They built out probably a dozen of these spaces. The real key is building the platform, building the tools, just to the bare kind of minimum viable product for promoters and everything they need. So now what's happening is in Sansar, there are going to be ongoing events with major artists, with everybody else, selling tickets, selling digital merchandise, and we won't even really know about it. And that's kind of where we want to get to, so that these things are now just happening. And the reason they aren't happening anywhere else, and they're not going to be happening anywhere else for a while, really comes down to a fundamental issue more in Silicon Valley and how they view the live events industry. And that's that one that we chatted about earlier. So if you're actually going to service the promoter, you have to build out all the tools for them, right? And if you can do that, you can basically provide them with a couple of fundamental, massive competitive advantages. So you can allow them to no geographical constraints, no regional constraints. You guys are all aware of that, right? That's really the kind of value. So whether it's a corporate partner, because corporate partners tend to want to see things that look exact. They don't kind of want cartoony or kid-like, which is often seen out there. So that was where the renderer kind of came into it. Maybe instead they want to give presentations. You can click a button and trigger some kind of 3D animation or effect here. Maybe it's not that though. Maybe instead you say, hey, what can we do with like a conference map? And so you can say, hey, let's go. And then you could start clicking around and triggering different animations. The cool part is Sansar did not even know any of these spaces were built until much afterwards they were built. And KPMG had already been using it for recruiting and for training purposes. Yeah, so I'll stop talking for a second because I don't remember the exact time. I think I'm a little 5 minutes over maybe. We could just spend a bunch of time hopping around different spots, talking about what they've done. But I figure maybe we'll open up for questions before hopping into VR. Is that something about right, Michael?
One question that I have, just to start, and then anyone else, feel free to jump in. The building out the spaces, the content creation, is any of that able to be done in the platform, or is it done using other tools and then uploaded into the platform?
So when it comes to creating the 3D assets itself, that is done outside of Sansar, like a Maya or Blender. Everything else is done in the platform. So from the actual venue creation or the space creation, then you can populate that with your own assets. You can just upload them into your inventory, drag and drop them into your scene, or you can purchase them off the Sansar store. From there. So yeah, that's the whole editor part of this. So like if I go into the codex, which is just one piece of this, I know there's kind of a lot in here. So whether it's chat and friending or profile and whatever else it is, we'll look at the avatar, maybe editor here in just a moment. But there are just many thousands of spaces always being built out. You can start searching around for them. Most of them are user generated. So like this one we're in right now, this is one Sansar did in-house because this is the Smithsonian one. And so this one was a little bit unique, right? But Smithsonian, they needed their 3D artwork kind of brought in, exact detail, then kind of giving curated walkthroughs of it. Instead, though, you could say, hey, here's kind of a fun thing they asked. So they said, Smithsonian is just a good example because they basically said, hey, look, we're super protective of all of our artwork. It needs to work in an exact way. We want to build all this out. Okay, great. Once we built it out, and our typical recommendation is there can be a lot of kind of creative trouble that I'm sure you guys know about when you're talking to people in VR. Where do they get started? You have all these tools. Where do you get started? Start with the one-to-one and then add in and sprinkle fun things or gaming interactivity on top. So over here, one example of that was they had asked us, hey, can we build out like some of these kind of psychedelic looking mushrooms, but in the real world, they don't move. In Sansar, can we add a button so that they can kind of expand and collapse? And so then you can kind of see it slowly start expanding, collapsing, whatever they might want. Yeah, anything else? I'm just gonna start popping around otherwise.
How many, in a particular instance, how many users can be in, say, in VR stably? Would you recommend? And then that question, expanding it, if it's multi-platform, if it's desktop and VR, like what are some numbers?
Yeah, so again, since we have our engine, we allow each individual scene creator or to set that on their own if they want to. So typically it's still recommended around, call it 100, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, just dependent. VR, desktop, not a huge difference on this side of it. I know AltSpace VR had some kind of real limitations on some of those. So only mobile users all had to be in the same space as an example on that one. This is just a little bit different. So then you can say, hey, on a per instance capacity, say you want to set it at 50 if it's a smaller space, or 100 or 150 or 200 if it's a larger space. Oh my gosh, there's NPCs coming at me. So yeah. I determine that. Yeah.
How do you manage level of participants? Like, is there any feature when you can have certain number of participants that are visible to all instances, or like to have multiple instances, and in that sense, how many of them can be in the same event?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and is a question I never ever get asked by partners, but I love that you asked it because it means that you're in this space and you know it. So AltSpace VR had built out some tech a while back to kind of solve some of this. So it uses some similarities to that. We call it our avatar broadcasting. So we have, if you're going to be broadcasting a single avatar or many avatars, and it's actually more than just avatars, it might be effects as well or other things going on, that we can all, there are like some best practices, but you could do that with many people. If you needed to, turn them on, turn them off, just with a flick of the command. So you can say, hey, I want to broadcast this performer during their 20-minute set. And the other performers that are waiting to play, they're not broadcast until it's their time to go on. Flick a switch or flick a command, turn it on, flick a switch, turn it off. Same with like things like megaphone mode and some of the more kind of granular details. So if you want to be heard in a booming voice across all of them, or if you want only some of the visual effects to be broadcast across all instances, others not, which is kind of the case in that Monster Cat event. The ones that are in the DJ booth, all of those need to be broadcast across all instances. The ones that were over in the Pioneer DJ space were just local to that instance. And so you didn't broadcast that out.
And I don't know if anyone has more questions, because I have a list.
Well, I didn't hear the specific answer. So for the instances, what would you suggest as a number of users in a particular instance? In Wave, for example, I was in one that was a multi-instance, and I guess they use the same thing. You see the performer, and presumably in all instances, and then their cap was 30 users per instance, which I think in Altspace, maybe Lance in our chat actually had done a large scale event recently and has attended a lot over there, and I think they maybe can go more than 30. But where would you say your recommendation? Obviously, very much, I'm sure it depends on the level and how heavy that level is, but
yeah, I think right now we're kind of setting a lot of the default around 80 to 100. That's obviously kind of fluctuates. Altspace, I know, is able to do more, mainly because they're not, the avatars are super light, super lightweight. So you can get away with it. Sansar, though, we've just been optimizing this engine specifically for this format. So you can think of like Altspace or any of these others. None of them were set out to be built for the live events industry. Altspace didn't even want to do live events, even when they were really successful. It's just that was the only thing that was working to drive a lot of people in. So it wasn't the SDK, it wasn't any of that. It was actually the events that was kind of doing it. And that's where now they've kind of had, it's just a little bit different path. So yeah, for on ours, you can think of it, say between the 80 and 100. But again, it kind of varies if it's a small space, large space, and what do you want that experience to kind of be like? So as an example, we did a show the other day using this tech that we kind of built out for it that I'll just link here in the chat real fast. So we did it's actually, I guess, the first time that this kind of tech was used, I believe. But so essentially what we did was we used to always do everything as an avatar based and then broadcasting that avatar out. However, there's a number of things where we found that wasn't necessarily what the customer needed or wanted. It's just what the people on the VR side always thought, hey, you should be an avatar, put on the headset. The problem with that, though, is many like performers, whether it's a speaker, so we had like the Intel CEO come and speak in Sansar. If it's a speaker or a big time artist or performer or a talent, they don't want to look like an avatar in most cases. They want to look like them. They don't want to be a cartoonish version of them. The fans also want to see them, not necessarily just an avatar. And during COVID, they might not be able to do anything except what they're already doing, which is live streams at home in their studio, what have you. So we just found a way, hey, can we bring those live streams in, chroma key composited against the green screen background, port them into Sansar, add 3D dimensional effects, add a little bit of lollipopping or billboarding so that they're always facing you. And now the artist can perform live as themselves, looking just like themselves inside these virtual spaces. And then right afterwards, for like the meet and greet, they can put on a headset, become a custom virtual avatar of them for the fan kind of back and forth interaction. And so I think that was one big issue that a lot of these people that are doing these virtual live events, they just weren't really listening to, but what does the customer need? What does the customer want? Don't just do what we think is kind of cool. What do they want? And they wanted both, but they didn't want it necessarily as the performance being done as the avatar. If they do, you can, but that's just word of caution. Because then when you start getting to the really big artists, you're going to start looking into, okay, are the eyebrows just right? You have to have a crazy sophisticated avatar editor, or you have to do some kind of volumetric capture or something else. And you can still do that. It's just a matter of where do you kind of want to focus or prioritize it. So like in Sansar, yeah.
Can you probably show some example of those high-level avatars?
Yeah. So what I can do is I'll share this video. Here's a video actually that happened. I'll share a few videos in the chat right now.
Okay, so we can watch it later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just going to post these in here real quick just before I forget.
And I had a question about,
Sure.
So for these different types of use cases, do you have what kind of crowd control functions do you have as a host? You know.
Yeah. So crowd control, we kind of put crowd control just under that kind of bigger bucket of moderation. So moderation is pretty important. Fortunately, we learned a lot about moderation from Second Life. And so Second Life had to deal with it when, sorry, pardon my French, when people would just run around as dildos shouting profanity at each other, right? And so how do you handle that type of behavior? And there's a few different ways of doing it. I think now you could probably do a lot more of that with some AI technologies that we're looking at. But at short, you have to give the users some form of control. So the ability to mute or block anybody they want. You need to make sure that there's still some actual virtual attendee or virtual staff members throughout, if these are a really large scale event that you can hop from instance to instance. You need to have an active forum or a place for people that can actually report these types of issues. So we have that kind of with our Discord community and then just our social communities there. And then we listen to the promoter a lot. So we listen to, hey, what kind of tool sets would you want and would you need? Oh, you want your own staff to be able to come in and moderate these and have expanded access? Okay, great. Because we have this engine, we're going to then allow it to add that extra access group so that you guys can have these powers. If instead it's just a matter of, hey, we want to allow people to only be able to enter wearing a specific type of clothing, or if they're joining from a specific area in the world, like a geo-filtering type of a thing. Or if it's to the point where you want to give them the ability to mute everybody all at once. All of those things are all become part of our roadmap, if they're not already built out, based on the needs that we're kind of hearing from it. So all of those are all possible. So far, our current approach of providing the users with some of this control, having actual staff members around inside to answer questions and to identify bad actors, quickly ban, kick, mute, suspend, just kind of with a flick of a key switch. And then having an active place for people to report this type of behavior has been pretty helpful. So our community has been great. Our community is really built up of creators and now creators and music lovers. And so there's just kind of right now, and it won't always be the case, but it's definitely a pretty friendly, kind of nice community. So if you hop into Discord, you hop into Sansar, there's not tons of trolling yet, though we know that it's the internet, so it's going to come. Was that kind of answered on the moderation piece? You can kind of go deep on it. There's just a sort of a number of
moderation, yeah. Well, crowd control, I was thinking more in like a corporate event type of structure. So our group has a fair bit of experience in a couple other platforms like Engage. And there are functions like automatically seat everyone in an amphitheater or something like this, or to manually reposition people who may be struggling with how to sit, how to not be disruptive or distracting or things like that. And I guess also, you mentioned, I think you have things like Megaphone, which I guess also kind of relates. As the host, you can mute everyone or selectively unmute people. Do you have those types of functions here for that?
Yeah. And so I think that's really it, is we can treat everybody differently as we need to. And that was just very important. So whether it's in giving people different powers or access and things like that. When it comes to, hey, everybody sit, we could easily do that if we needed to. We haven't had that request or need to do that just yet, mainly because seats don't really make a ton of sense inside of these virtual spaces just yet. But yeah, you could totally do that. Right now, there are sit points on a lot of items and things like that if you're just walking around. Kind of notice I was just tweaking my avatar's shirt. It looks a little crumpled. But you can basically manipulate. So anybody that's building any assets, put it onto the Sansar store that's selling it. If they're built using Marvelous Designer, which pretty much everything is now in Sansar, I mean, if you're doing that way, then all of them, you can have that dynamic cloth. So allowing brands, anybody else to sell these things to their kind of heart's content. And then fans can manipulate these in kind of an infinite number of ways. Yeah, so let's see. So crowd control.
Would you agree that Sansar so far, to me, looks like a platform that perfectly tailored to any kind of entertainment event? And like when you say events, so it mainly some live events with entertainment purposes to showcasing some creators and creativity, and it's perfectly built for that. However, if you consider, for instance, business conferences as event or exhibition as event, probably some functionality is a little bit redundant for that type of purposes. So, do you see Sansar going after both the directions, like entertainment and business events, or it rather remains as an entertainment platform for live events?
So I think it's great for the entertainment platform for live events. We're actually already working with a number of corporate partners as well. So around their corporate events. So this isn't one of those actually. This is just a space I saw was finalized kind of yesterday. Real quick, do any of you guys go to E3? Or have you guys kind of been to E3?
No, nope. Something similar many years ago, but not E3.
So anyways, at E3, it's here in Los Angeles. It basically takes over LA for the period that it's kind of live. But the kind of the joke about it is people don't even buy tickets to E3 anymore. They just go to the JW Marriott lobby that's across the street for all the business meetings and kind of everything that's going on. Yeah. So kind of is just a joke on the side. This is the JW Marriott business lobby. Exactly.
Yeah.
If you take a look at it on Google, you'll kind of see it sort of looks like this. So for the corporate networking purposes, then everybody can have their own profile. You can start adding this and kind of building onto it. To your point, Andre, around the redundancies, I think, the way we kind of see it is we're really building out, especially from the entertainment side, these live events, really even catering more and more for music, because from there, all the tool sets that we need for music are the same things that you would need for corporate. It's just a little bit different on who's going to be the end user there. And so you could polish it. So if it's, hey, we need corporate event rooms tied to this that only certain people can access, great. We've kind of already built out that same functionality in the music side. So building out corporate events that only certain ticket holders can access with different expanded access and abilities, all of that is possible too. It's really just, from ours, we've just seen the biggest demand, the biggest inbound demand from the music industry, especially with COVID, and the model of they want to push some ticket sales, right? So for us, it's, hey, we have the platform, they're pushing ticket sales, we take platform-wide fees off of all that then. And they are planning on.
And you talked to us before, you touched on the IP, how you handle IP with multiple IP owners. Just speaking of the merit of this lobby, is it have you licensed the right to replicate this lobby in Sansar, or it's in the public domain?
So fortunately, we do know the Marriott team. They basically saw this because Sansar, we didn't build this. This is a space a couple of community members just built out on their side, kind of for fun. And so from them, fortunately, though, the Marriott team was pretty excited when they saw it. They thought it was super cool. As far as all that goes, that kind of starts falling into the landscape of user-generated content. So how is that going to look, and licensing? It's really on like a case-by-case basis. So if we're working with a venue like a nightclub venue, and then building that out, typically, if it's coming through Sansar Studios at least, that we need to make sure that we're working with people that have the rights to that. If it's a community member that's building it out, starts to get a little bit more of the gray area. And that's sort of the gray area that Second Life has been operating in for the last 15 years or so.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you still want to do a piece in VR, Michael, or you could also join in the virtual walkthrough here if we want to, but
I was going to ask you actually if we still had time for it, and if not, where would you suggest, where would be your first recommendations that we should jump into? Because I think we're down to the group who's very much ready to.
Where do we meet?
So we could meet in any of these spaces. I have an 11:45. You know what we could do?
I realize,
let's do Marriott. I really like the place.
Let me do this actually. I kind of, so you can go here. I think this space is actually technically private right now because it's not fully finalized here yet. What are you guys? Okay, so lobby is one. What are you guys kind of in the mood for? Corporate, entertainment, networking, fantastical, real life?
I'd rather go for real life, but that's my bias.
Okay.
I'm open to whatever the community is interested in. So if Andre wants real life, are there any other votes? Tim, Lance, Alina, you're the only faces I can see right now.
I mean, for me, some of that Star Wars stuff with it, those models would be pretty cool. I mean, those are just classics, you know.
Yeah, last year I visited the Hollywood Art Museum.
Oh, cool!
And they were very impressive. Not only that one, also the poster work from I think
Drew Struz in there. Yeah, we can do that too. These are all, some of those are connected. Those are super cool. Well, here, how about this? What I might do is, just because we're kind of lucky on time, I'm just going to paste a number of the links to these spaces in the chat real fast. And we'll see what we can get to. So I'm trying to pull up my Zoom as we're chatting here. Okay, hold on. Where is Zoom? How do I get to, oh, is this it? Sorry, I think I found my Zoom. Basically try to get back to my chat on Zoom. Why do you guys know why Zoom? Here. Basically, I'm just trying to get back to the Zoom chat on the one that I'm presenting from. Okay, let's see. Start Zoom, close window. Okay, well, all right, fine. Then you're gonna, you know what? I just have to do it old school. So even if I can't hop in right now, I'm just gonna share a number of these in chat here in a second. So let me grab this one. Let me grab the Roddenberry next. I think you guys might get a kick out of this. Oh, there's a bunch. I forgot. Let's add this one. This one was super cool. If you're a Star Trek fan, this is kind of fun. So I'm gonna post all of these in there in just a moment. I'm also gonna add this space. So this is more. We did this just with an esports company here. We built out the largest existing esports space, at least in the US at the time. Some of these Ready Player One spaces are cool. I'm gonna add, we have time for. Oh, this one's kind of cool too. This is just a user space. This was not a real life space, but it's kind of a cool beach scene. There's a different beach scene where we ran a big kind of charity event where you had to pick up the items, the trash on the beach. And as you picked up the trash on the beach, it would build out these elaborate trash sculptures in the sky, which is kind of cool. Okay, and then this one's kind of more, here's another real life space. Well, built on top of real life space. Oh, I didn't even show you this one actually. Sorry, I know I'm kind of going wild on some of these here. This one we worked with NASA on, so that one was pretty cool. That one is the real life Saturn V rocket, but it's within a fictionalized space museum. So some of the real assets just inside of both here. And then I'm just gonna drop all of these into the Zoom chat real fast. Sorry, I am terrible at managing time. Apologies, guys. All right, so I'm just gonna close this out. So I'm just gonna paste all these in here real quick. Okay, I'll get chat here.
Would you mind drop a couple links to networking spaces, as you mentioned? Like, what does it mean for Sansar? Or just one? Yeah.
Yep, that sounds good.
And also, let me just practically. So some of us who are going to jump in here in VR, how do we find each other? What are the best practices for just finding another person? In it, finding the right room and stuff.
So if you start in the same space, you can click on the other person, click add friend. That'll send them a friend request. When they then accept your friend request, then even if you get separated inside Sansar in different areas, you can always teleport right back to that friend. Yeah. And so, okay, here, sorry, I'm just gonna drop in a few of these. So like if you were starting off in one of those first ones up here in terms of pasting, so that the Lost Art of Star Wars, for instance, then you guys would probably just pop in there, you'd be in there together. And then once you're inside, you probably see each other, you can hover over them, kind of see their names and everything. And again, the best thing is once you're friends with them, then you can kind of teleport right to them, start sending them private chat messages, all that, whether it's desktop or VR.
Yeah.
Cool. Right there.
Who's this guy? Yeah, my thumb pad, like on both controllers, the top right button is dead. So I don't know why. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me it's the menu button, not the D-pad. Yeah. Let's see what we're doing. Yeah, I would expect that they, well, as he was talking about, like they're not going to, they're going for the logistic value proposition of VR, is to have access to something that you can't otherwise get to, not something fundamentally different. Mm-hmm. Is mine? No, I think that was Andres. Mine is, yeah, mine is M. Barker. Actually, no, let me say this because I need. Your name is the easiest to find, I think. Yeah. I'm expecting Lance to join. I mean, it looked like yes, capital D, lowercase t. I think this was photogrammetry. This model. Oh, sacrilege. Sacrilege. I gotta take a screenshot of everybody playing around with Akbar and DeLoreans and Sand people. Actually, I was concerned to see how this would perform, but it's obviously got no problem. The spatial drop off on the audio is effective. I think Engage is too loud. It doesn't drop off fast enough. Do these work? None of these don't work. This is not what it looked like on the picture, so I don't know what it will say. There's a door. How do I interact with this door? Ah, interesting. So I guess this might be a reasonably good example of a potential art exhibition. Over here, there's an avatar that looks like one of those high resolution avatars he was mentioning. Yeah. Close to it, it'll automatically show you places. Am I pumping it up? Oh, I am, yeah. So the way that the animation works is that you just become disembodied. I'm standing behind myself now.